You've probably seen images of it, oh, 1,000 times, that incredible ceiling in the Vatican. You know, the one home to probably one of our history's most recognizable moments. Those fingers, God and Adam, almost touching.
Mm-hmm. Iconic.
But what if we told you there's just this whole universe of story and struggle and, well, profound philosophy etched into those frescoes? Something far beyond what you might see at first glance.
Exactly.
What if it's not just this religious masterpiece, but like a vibrant tapestry of human experience, divine connection, and the very spirit of the Renaissance, all painted with, sweat, agony, and a real defiance of expectations?
That's precisely what we're getting into today. We're taking a comprehensive deep dive into Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling. We've really dug into a deep stack of sources here, historical accounts, art analyses, theological takes, even personal letters,
Right.
to unpack not just how it was made, but its intricate iconography, all those symbols, and its enduring message. Our mission really is to give you a shortcut to understanding this masterpiece, not just as some monumental religious artwork, which it is, of course, but as a reflection of human existence, our connection with the divine, and those powerful intellectual currents swirling around during the Renaissance. You'll really gain a richer appreciation for what makes this artwork truly unique.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this monumental achievement. Let's discover the genius and maybe, yeah, the agony behind its creation.
Yeah.
So let's set the scene a bit. Italy, dawn of the 16th century. For a lot of us, I think it conjures up images of just dazzling artistic brilliance, right? Intellectual breakthroughs, a kind of golden age.
High Renaissance.
And it's true. This was the High Renaissance, a truly flourishing time for humanism.
Mm-hmm.
The focus shifted dramatically, didn't it? Towards human potential, achievement, rediscovering classical knowledge.
Absolutely.
We saw scientific inquiry starting to, well, challenge long-held beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And this explosion of artistic innovation that really reshaped how we see the world. I mean, think about it. Leonardo, Raphael, and of course Michelangelo all working then, pushing boundaries in like every conceivable
For a
world.
plot bed.
It was a time of incredible intellectual ferment, vibrant cultural explosion.
Yeah, and this is crucial. Beneath that dazzling surface, the reality of Italy was, well, way more complex and often quite turbulent.
Right.
While it was culturally soaring, the peninsula itself was politically fragmented. It wasn't Italy as we know it. It was this mosaic of powerful, often warring city-states and principalities. You had Venice, Florence, Milan, Naples, the Papal States.
All vying for power.
Exactly, all vying for power, territory, influence. It led to frequent skirmishes, shifting alliances, just an atmosphere of, pervasive instability, a time of immense political flux.
Okay.
And critically, the Catholic Church, even though it was this massive temporal and spiritual power, was facing an unprecedented internal crisis.
The Reformation was brewing.
The rumblings were getting louder, yeah. The Protestant Reformation was challenging its theological authority, its political sway, even its spiritual legitimacy. There was this palpable sense of internal division and, frankly, external threat.
So it wasn't just this time of enlightened artistic flourishing. There was this deep political and religious anxiety simmering underneath it all.
Absolutely.
And that broader context, as you just laid out, it feels absolutely crucial for understanding why a project of this monumental scale even happened. It wasn't just, oh, let's commission some nice art. It feels much more strategic.
Oh, not at all. Our sources make it crystal clear. Pope Julius II, who commissioned it, was a formidable figure, intensely ambitious.
The warrior pope, right?
That's him, known as the warrior pope for a reason. He actually led troops into battle, recaptured territories, really sought to restore the church's earthly power. He wasn't just thinking about a single artwork, he was thinking bigger picture. Solidifying the Catholic Church's authority in the face of all these immense challenges, the political fragmentation, the internal dissent, the looming Reformation, he wanted to reestablish the Vatican, not just as the spiritual heart of Christendom, but as Europe's undisputed cultural and intellectual center. His vision for the Sistine Chapel ceiling, therefore, wasn't merely decorative. It wasn't just patronage in the traditional sense. It was the launch of a colossal art project designed specifically to serve this goal. It was meant to be a visual manifesto, underscoring the church's enduring power, its theological supremacy, its cultural dominance in an era of profound unrest.
Wow.
It was art as a statement, really, a declaration of enduring power meant to awe and inspire, reinforcing the church's narrative of divine authority and stability in a very, very unstable world.
So it's not just a pretty picture, it's like a strategic investment in cultural capital, meant to communicate power and stability. Almost a form of propaganda, you could say, but elevated to the absolute highest art form.
Precisely. A strategic investment, absolutely. It was meant to be this undeniable testament to the church's spiritual and intellectual might. Something so awe-inspiring, it would humble skeptics and reinforce the faith of believers, making sure the Vatican remained the absolute beacon of culture and authority.
Okay, now here's where the human drama and maybe the surprise really kicks in. When you think Sistine Chapel ceiling, you think Michelangelo, the painter,
Mm-hmm.
arguably the greatest fresco artist ever.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point in his career, Michelangelo Buonarroti was known primarily as a sculptor.
That's the twist.
I mean, he was already a living legend for works like the Pietà, carved when he was just 24, unbelievably. And the colossal David, finished around 1504.
Breathtaking works.
Absolutely. These showed his unparalleled ability to, bring marble to life, to imbue cold stone with incredible motion, anatomical precision. His experience in painting, especially in fresco, which is notoriously difficult, was actually pretty limited for someone being asked to tackle a project of this unimaginable scale.
It seems like a baffling choice, doesn't it?
Totally.
Okay.
Like asking a master chef to design a skyscraper or something.
It really was a surprising choice. And for Michelangelo himself, deeply unwelcome.
He didn't want to do it.
Not at all. Our sources, including his own letters, they confirm he resisted. Pretty vehemently, actually. He repeatedly told Pope Julius II, "My art is sculpture, I am not a painter."
Wow.
He even suspected, maybe rightly so, that his rivals, like the architect Bramante, were actually pushing the Pope to give him the painting job, hoping he'd fail, knowing his lack of experience in fresco.
Sabotage.
Potentially.
Right.
But despite Michelangelo's reluctance, his insistence that he wasn't a painter, Pope Julius II was absolutely insistent. Julius was a man who got what he wanted.
Right.
And maybe, just maybe, he recognized something in Michelangelo's monumental sculptural vision, that ability to create figures of immense physical and emotional power that he believed could be translated to the massive canvas of the Sistine ceiling. Regardless of the Pope's exact motives, this challenging task, this forced commission, ultimately opened a new and pivotal chapter in Michelangelo's already illustrious career. It transformed him really from a master sculptor into one of the greatest painters in history. It was this kind of forced metamorphosis that, against all odds, yielded an unparalleled artistic triumph, proving his genius was just boundless.
So how did that background then, as a sculptor, this deep understanding of form, of material, how did that actually inform his painting? Was it a hindrance because he was out of his comfort zone, or did it somehow become a unique strength that set him apart?
Well, what's fascinating here is how Michelangelo's background uniquely shaped his approach to painting. It transformed what could have been a hindrance into an extraordinary asset.
Okay.
This period saw him move from Florence, the heartland of humanism, to Rome, the absolute epicenter of papal power,
Yeah.
and a place just overflowing with classical ruins, sculptural inspiration everywhere.
Right, surrounded by it.
Exactly. And in this new environment, his profound understanding of classical sculpture, the human form, anatomy, dynamic movement, how light plays on solid mass became the bedrock of his fresco technique. He didn't just paint flat figures. He conceived of them almost as if they were sculpted in 3 dimensions.
You can really see that.
Oh, absolutely. Using light and shadow, that chiaroscuro, and masterful foreshortening to create incredible volume, weight, depth. You see it in the sheer mass and physical presence of his figures. They almost feel like they could step right out of the plaster.
Yeah.
This fusion of sculptural power with pictorial art was utterly revolutionary. It set a whole new standard for how painted figures could convey solidity and monumentality.
And there was the internal struggle, too, wasn't there? The personal side of it.
Immense. Our sources hint at the huge personal difficulties and deep contemplation Michelangelo went through. I mean, imagine the pressure of papal demands, the sheer physical strain of working overhead for years.
Unbelievable.
The artistic challenge of mastering a new medium on that scale, and the intellectual weight of interpreting such a vast, complex theological narrative. All of this internal struggle, this profound engagement with the material and his own limits, it intrinsically shaped the very spirit of the artwork. It imbued it with this raw human emotion, a sense of gravitas, a weighty philosophical depth that goes way beyond just technique. He poured his own internal landscape into those figures.
So what we're seeing isn't just paint on plaster. It's the direct result of a master's intense personal and artistic battle, almost sculpted onto the ceiling.
Precisely. Every muscle, every expression, every powerful pose carries the echo of his unique struggle and definitely his sculptural DNA.
So let's just picture the scene. Michelangelo, sculptor by trade, now faced with this enormous ceiling. And it wasn't just a matter of picking up a brush, it was this incredibly demanding technical and physical ordeal, almost unlike anything else in art, right?
Completely. We're talking about a classical fresco technique here. And that's not like painting on canvas in a comfy studio.
Right.
It involves applying pigments directly onto wet plaster, the intonaco. You have to work incredibly fast before that plaster dries and the chemical reaction happens, because once it's dry, the paint won't bind properly. The colors won't be as vibrant or, crucially, permanent.
So it's a race against time.
Absolutely. It required immense technical skill, incredible precision, and stamina that, frankly, few artists possessed. Each day, he had to apply just enough fresh plaster for the section he could physically paint before it dried. That section's called a giornata, literally a day's work.
Wow, a day's work.
It truly was a race against the clock for every single section, painting against drying plaster day after day.
And the scale just compounded everything I imagined.
Exponentially. The ceiling is roughly 40 meters long, 14 meters wide. That's about the length of an Olympic swimming pool and half its width.
Just vast.
And it's suspended some 20 meters, maybe 65 feet above the chapel floor.
So how did he even reach it?
Well, he had to design a custom scaffold. This is fascinating. Unlike typical scaffolding that rests on the floor, which would have completely blocked the chapel below his, was innovative. It was suspended from the ceiling itself.
No way.
Yes, a series of wooden platforms cantilevered out from holes drilled high up in the walls. This ingenious structure let him work directly beneath the curved surface, enabling 4 years of nearly continuous, absolutely grueling work from 1508 to 1512.
4 years.
It was a remarkable feat of engineering as much as it was art.
4 years, almost nonstop, working on a scaffold, looking up. I mean, I can barely look at my phone for 10 minutes without my neck starting to hurt. I just can't fathom that kind of sustained physical strength.
Exactly. And that brings us straight to the grueling physical toll this project took on Michelangelo. He spent years working essentially on his back or twisted into these incredibly unnatural positions, paint constantly dripping into his eyes, his head craned upwards. His own accounts and later biographies describe constant debilitating pain. Severe back and neck pain, headaches, eye fatigue. His vision reportedly deteriorated significantly.
I believe it.
Imagine trying to achieve such precision, such artistic mastery, while your body is just screaming in protest, while you're physically miserable every single working moment. It's a testament not just to his sheer willpower and dedication, but to his profound artistic vision that he actually endured it. He even wrote a famous poem complaining about it, mentioning his goiter from straining his neck and his belly being squashed under my chin.
Wow. He really painted a picture, literally and figuratively. And the challenge of scale, too. How do you make figures on a ceiling 60 feet up still look right, still have impact? Do you just paint them enormous, or are there optical tricks involved?
That's a brilliant point, and Michelangelo tackled it with incredible ingenuity. The ceiling's immense height absolutely necessitated significant artistic adjustments for distant viewing.
Right, otherwise they'd look tiny.
Exactly. If he painted figures at normal human proportions, they'd look minuscule and insignificant from the chapel floor. So he had to master proportions and perspective in a way that kind of defied conventional rules. He exaggerated certain features, elongated figures, even slightly distorted perspectives. He made figures at the far end of the chapel appear larger to the viewer than those closer, ensuring they looked correct and impactful from below.
Clever.
He also had to think very carefully about body postures, making them incredibly dynamic, dramatic, expressive enough to convey their message and emotion even when viewed from way down there. This required a profound grasp of optics and visual perception, basically ensuring the scale of the figures increased as they moved further from the viewer's direct line of sight on the floor, creating a cohesive visual experience despite the vastness.
So he was literally inventing solutions as he went along, adapting, refining his technique to overcome these unprecedented challenges that nobody had really faced on this scale before.
That's absolutely right. Our sources really highlight that Michelangelo largely refined his fresco technique through practical, on-the-job experience during this project. He wasn't just following a manual, He was innovating, adapting, problem-solving in real time, often pushing the limits of what was even thought possible with fresco.
Mhm.
This hands-on, self-developed technique is part of what makes the Sistine Chapel ceiling so unique and why it became such a benchmark.
Yeah.
And as we discussed, his background as a sculptor was absolutely critical here.
That anatomical knowledge.
Exactly. His deep anatomical knowledge, gained from years of carving marble, understanding the human form in 3 dimensions, allowed him to render every figure's musculature, their tendons, their posture, with extraordinary realism and dynamism, even in paint. You see the power of the human body, its weight, its tension, its grace, in every single figure he painted, from the sort of languid atom to the explosive figure of God the Father. It's truly a sculptor's eye at work in a painter's medium, and that fusion created something entirely new.
Okay, so he's battling physical agony, designing new scaffolding, inventing techniques on the fly. But beyond the sheer scale and difficulty, what about the actual art itself? What were the groundbreaking artistic contributions he brought to fresco painting that really set this work apart?
Well, one of the most remarkable aspects, and you can see it immediately, is the intense three-dimensionality of his figures. It's a direct result of his sculptural background.
Yeah, they really pop.
They possess this remarkable sense of depth and volume. They almost seem to leap off the flat surface of the ceiling. This wasn't common in fresco to this degree before him. He achieved this through masterful use of light and shadow, that chiaroscuro we mentioned.
Right.
If you look at, say, the figure of God in the separation of light from darkness, notice how one side of his body is brilliantly lit, almost glowing, while the other side is plunged into deep shadow. This isn't just about showing light, it's about making him feel incredibly solid, like he's carved in 3D, even though he's painted flat.
It gives him real weight.
Immense physical presence, yeah, a real sense of weight and power, which in turn enhances the dramatic impact and the realism of his figures.
And it's not just the bodies that have this incredible presence, is it? It's the emotion, the sort of inner lives of these figures.
Absolutely. Beyond just physical form, Michelangelo conveyed profound emotional and psychological insights through the figures' facial expressions and their body language. Every character, whether it's a prophet, a sibyl, or a figure in one of the narrative scenes, has this unique and deeply expressive face that tells a story of their inner world, their contemplation, their despair, their awe, their fury.
Can you give an example?
Well, take the prophet Jeremiah. His brow is furrowed with this palpable sense of weariness and melancholy. His whole body is slumped. It's not just depicting a prophet, it's depicting a man burdened by the weight of prophecy and human suffering. This psychological depth was truly revolutionary for the time. It invites you, the viewer, to connect with the raw human experience depicted, not just the religious story. Furthermore, our sources note his use of an unusually bright and vivid color palette for the period. Now, many of these colors faded over time due to centuries of candle smoke, grime, and frankly, some pretty clumsy previous restoration.
Right. How about that?
But the comprehensive restoration work done from the 1980s onwards has largely restored them to their original brilliance. It revealed a Sistine Chapel ceiling that is far more vibrant, intense, almost jewel-toned than generations had previously imagined. The colors are so striking they almost vibrate off the ceiling.
So essentially, he just transcended the limitations of the medium. He was bringing the principles of sculpture form, volume, presence, that profound human emotion to a flat, two-dimensional surface, creating this universe populated by monumental, three-dimensional beings that felt incredibly alive.
Precisely. He brought a sculptor's understanding of form and the body to a 2D medium, creating a whole new standard for painting. He wasn't just painting pictures, he was creating powerful, almost tangible representations of these biblical figures.
Yeah.
And that legacy of the restoration is so key. It wasn't just about cleaning off centuries of grime, it was about meticulously revealing the original intent. It allowed art historians completely new insights into Michelangelo's specific techniques, his artistic choices. The sheer vibrancy of those rediscovered colors fundamentally changed our perception of the work. It showed that Michelangelo wasn't just a master of form, but also a truly daring colorist, using these vibrant hues to punch up the dramatic impact of his powerful figures. It let us finally see the brilliance he originally intended, impacting our understanding of his artistic philosophy and demonstrating a mastery that was just utterly comprehensive.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit now and try to get a mental map of this colossal work, because it's not just a collection of stunning individual figures, is it? It's this meticulously organized, sprawling narrative structure. We've talked about its impressive scale, 40 meters long, 14 wide. But how is this vast ceiling actually structured to tell such a complex story?
It's organized with, frankly, breathtaking clarity into a grand design. It forms a visually cohesive and profoundly meaningful narrative. Right at the very center, running down the spine of the ceiling, are 9 large rectangular scenes.
The main events.
Exactly. And these aren't just any scenes. They depict the creation story from the Old Testament, specifically from the book of Genesis. They unfold chronologically, starting from the very beginning, God creating light, moving through the creation of humanity, and culminating in the story of Noah and the flood.
Okay.
These are then flanked by those massive figures of the prophets and sibyls we'll talk about. And then in the corners, the narrative continues with 4 dramatic corner pendentives depicting other salvation stories from the Old Testament, like David and Goliath or Judith and Holofernes.
Wow, there's a lot going on.
There is. And what's fascinating here is that these central Genesis scenes aren't merely illustrative. They intertwine deep theological and philosophical messages. They explore these universal themes: human creation itself, the concept of free will and choice, the tragic fall into sin, and ultimately the promise of salvation and humanity's relationship with the divine. It's a cohesive visual narrative that speaks to the very essence of human existence.
So it's more than just biblical storytelling. It's like a profound philosophical statement on humanity's place in the universe, our relationship with God, almost a visual treatise on the human condition from divine origin to inherent struggles and potential redemption.
Exactly. This is more than just a literal retelling of Genesis. It's a profound philosophical statement. Michelangelo used these biblical narratives as a framework to explore universal human experiences and existential questions that still resonate across cultures and time. The visual unity he achieved across such diverse scenes, from God's singular act of creation to the chaotic deluge to form a single monumental work of art, is truly breathtaking. Every figure, every gesture, every dramatic interaction is placed with deliberate intent to contribute to this overarching grand design. It guides you, the viewer, through this journey from creation to potential redemption, all while inviting deep theological and philosophical contemplation. It's a masterful integration of art, theology, and philosophy.
Okay, let's dive into some of these iconic central scenes. For so many people, just seeing an image of the creation of Adam is the Sistine Chapel moment. But there's so much more to this narrative. Let's start right at the beginning. Like you said, the separation of light from darkness. What are we actually seeing there? How does Michelangelo depict something so abstract, so foundational?
In the separation of light from darkness, Michelangelo captures the very establishment of cosmic order, that initial divine act that brings form out of chaos. You see this colossal figure of God depicted with incredible dynamism, immense energy, almost filling the entire frame.
Yeah, he's huge.
His arms are outstretched, as if he's literally pushing apart these swirling masses of light and shadow, creating the distinction between day and night. His powerful form is seen from below, dramatically foreshortened, like he's hurtling towards you, conveying immense power and momentum. It's a dramatic contrast between swirling, formless chaos and the sudden imposition of order by divine will.
Wow.
Michelangelo here doesn't just show the event, he imbues it with the raw, primordial energy and power of the divine command. Visualizing the universe coming into being from nothingness, pure energy in motion. It's a foundational scene, setting this incredibly awe-inspiring tone for everything that follows.
And then the most famous one, the one everyone instantly recognizes. The creation of Adam, that iconic image of the fingers almost touching. What is Michelangelo truly capturing in that single profound gesture?
The creation of Adam. Yeah, probably the most universally recognized scene on the ceiling. And for incredibly profound reasons. It's just a masterclass in conveying this deep theological concept, the divine spark of life through human form and emotion. On the right, you have God. Powerful, aged, yet incredibly dynamic, clad in these swirling robes, surrounded by an entourage of angels, seemingly propelled by immense divine energy. He reaches out with an outstretched arm, his hand firm, purposeful.
And Adam.
On the left, Adam is earthbound. He's languid, still receiving that spark of life. His left hand reaches out, mirroring God's, but there's that slight, infinitesimal gap between their fingers, that crucial space where the divine breath of life is about to be imparted.
It's electric.
It really is. Michelangelo depicts Adam with this idealized, muscular form, a real testament to the Renaissance admiration for the human body as a divine creation. The tension, the anticipation in that almost touch is palpable. It's interpreted as the very spark of consciousness, the soul being transmitted from creator to created. It's a breathtaking moment of profound connection between the human and the divine, symbolizing not just physical creation, but the impartation of life and reason.
Yeah.
And the contrast between God's dynamic energy and Adam's sort of relaxed receptiveness speaks volumes about the nature of this divine gift.
So much meaning packed into such a tiny gap. It's less about a physical touch and more about a spiritual transmission. Okay, what about the creation of Eve? It often feels like it gets less attention than Adam's creation, but it's equally significant in the biblical story.
It does get less attention, yeah, but it's a crucial part of the narrative and a powerful scene in its own right. The creation of Eve directly follows Adam's creation and depicts the origin of the human species in full. Here, you see Eve emerging from Adam's side, seemingly pulled into being by the hand of God, who stands before Adam in this commanding posture.
While Adam sleeps.
Right. Adam lies in a deep sleep, his body vulnerable, while Eve emerges fully formed, kneeling in an act of reverence towards her creator. Michelangelo's anatomical mastery, his dramatic flair are fully on display here. It deepens our understanding of human nature and that interdependent relationship between Adam and Eve as the progenitors of humanity. It's a moment of profound vulnerability, awe, new beginnings, showcasing Michelangelo's ability to imbue even these foundational narratives with deep psychological resonance and a real sense of sacred mystery.
And then the dramatic turn. The beginning of humanity's downfall, that pivotal moment of choice and consequence. The fall and expulsion from paradise.
This is a dual scene, incredibly powerful and emotionally charged in its composition. On the right side, you see Adam and Eve reaching for the forbidden fruit, tempted by the serpent, who's depicted as this seductive, half-human, half-serpentine figure entwined around the tree of knowledge. Their faces show a mix of curiosity, temptation, a nascent awareness,
And then the left side.
a horrifying consequence. A powerful angel, brandishing a sword, forcefully drives them out of the idyllic Garden of Eden. Their bodies, which were once idealized and innocent, are now twisted in shame and despair. Their faces are contorted with horror and agony. It illustrates humanity's fall into sin and the stark, immediate consequences of free will. Michelangelo emphasizes the horror and despair in their faces, their bodies, the pain of expulsion, the visible loss of innocence, the sudden burden of knowing good and evil. It's a visceral depiction of a pivotal moment, showing the immediate, devastating effects of a single choice. The contrast between their physical beauty before and their anguish after is just striking.
And finally, another classic image, Noah's flood. After the fall, this scene often feels like a divine reckoning, doesn't it?
Noah's flood is a sprawling, chaotic, and deeply moving scene. It explores themes of destruction and rebirth, God's justice and his mercy. It's just filled with desperate figures clinging to anything they can, each other, dying trees, small hills trying to escape the surging, overwhelming waters. Their faces are etched with terror and hopelessness.
But the ark is there.
In the background, yeah. Noah's Ark offers this distant, almost unreachable beacon of salvation, a small island of hope amidst widespread destruction. The survival of those on the Ark symbolizes hope, the continuation of humanity. It illustrates that delicate balance between God's severe punishment for human sin and the promise of renewal, a new covenant with humanity. Each scene, really, is a masterclass in conveying profound theological concepts through human form and raw emotion. It invites us to reflect on our own journey, our choices, our relationship with the divine.
It raises that question, doesn't it? How does Michelangelo use physical form, dramatic composition, to express these deep psychological and spiritual states, to make these ancient stories feel so immediate and relatable?
Exactly. He doesn't just show figures. He shows humanity in its rawest, most vulnerable, and most powerful moments, embodying that Renaissance ideal of man as a complex being, capable of both sin and salvation, struggling with his own nature and his connection to the divine.
Okay, so beyond the central creation narrative, which we've just unpacked, the ceiling also features these incredible, monumental figures along its long sides. The prophets and the sibyls, they feel like these silent, powerful observers to the main drama. Where exactly are they placed, and what's their significance? Especially putting pagan figures like sibyls in a sacred Christian space.
That's a great question. These monumental figures are strategically located along the extended edges of the ceiling, flanking those central Genesis scenes in alternating order. And what's truly fascinating and very revealing about the Renaissance mindset is how Michelangelo, guided by Pope Julius II and the intellectual currents of the time, deliberately blended Jewish-Christian tradition with ancient pagan culture.
Right, prophets and symbols together.
Exactly. The prophets figures like Isaiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Jonah, they're from the Hebrew sacred texts. They foretold the coming of the Messiah, revealed God's plan to the Israelites. The Sibyls, on the other hand, were ancient prophetesses from pagan mythology, figures consulted by Greeks and Romans for prophecies. Putting them side by side in the Pope's private chapel is profoundly symbolic. A very bold humanist statement, really.
So it's not just about Christian prophecy then. It's suggesting something much larger, like a kind of universal wisdom that transcends specific religious boundaries.
Precisely. These figures symbolize the universality of Catholicism, as it was understood then, and its perceived continuity with ancient wisdom and diverse spiritual foresight. It's a visual statement that divine truth isn't confined to a single tradition or covenant, but echoes through different cultures and ages, revealed through various means.
That's very Renaissance.
Yep. Deeply aligned with the humanist spirit, yes, which sought to integrate classical philosophy and wisdom with Christian thought, believing that truth and divine revelation could be found in various forms, even outside the traditional Judeo-Christian lineage. Our sources tell us they're depicted with immense psychological depth, unique expressions, different postures, representing various ages and genders. This diversity embodies different spiritual states, different forms of human prayer and contemplation. It shows a wide spectrum of human engagement with the divine, from deep scholarly study to ecstatic, almost terrifying visions.
That's fascinating. Can you give us an example? How does he convey this universal wisdom or diverse spiritual foresight through, say, one of the Sibyls?
Let's take the Delphic Sibyl. She's depicted as this youthful, elegant figure. She's turning her head sharply to the left, as if reacting to a sudden divine inspiration.
Greta can picture her.
Her eyes are wide, her mouth slightly open, conveying this moment of intense, almost breathless prophecy. Her robes are voluminous, adding to her dramatic presence, and her body is coiled with this dynamic energy that characteristic Michelangelo's sculptural quality. She isn't just a static portrait. She's caught in the very act of receiving or delivering divine insight.
Okay.
Her presence there, alongside the Old Testament prophets, asserts that even the classical world, through figures like the Sibyls, had inklings of universal truth, that they foretold, however dimly, the coming of a new age or a divine plan. It emphasizes that sacred wisdom is universal, a concept deeply aligned with those Renaissance intellectual currents. It shows how the Church, even while facing all these challenges, felt confident enough in its own truth to embrace and incorporate symbols from outside its tradition, arguing for a universality that predated and encompassed Christianity itself.
And what about the prophets? Is there one that particularly embodies that human struggle or insight you mentioned?
Absolutely. Consider the prophet Jeremiah. In stark contrast to the Delphic Sibyl's youthful energy, Jeremiah is depicted as old, weary, deeply melancholic. His head is bowed, supported by his hand, his brow deeply furrowed with this palpable sense of weariness, almost despair. His whole body is slumped, conveying the immense burden of his prophetic role. He's not shown actively prophesying, but in a moment of profound contemplation or sorrow, perhaps lamenting the destruction of Jerusalem, or just the stubbornness of humanity.
More eternal.
Exactly. This portrayal goes beyond simple biblical illustration. It conveys the profound psychological weight of carrying divine knowledge and witnessing human suffering. It humanizes the prophet, inviting empathy and reflection on the universal experience of sorrow and responsibility. It exemplifies how Michelangelo used physical form and facial expression to convey these deep psychological and spiritual states, making these grand figures incredibly relatable.
Now, we absolutely cannot talk about the Sistine Chapel ceiling without talking about the ignudi. These are those distinctive, monumental, naked male figures, sculpted with incredible musculature, flanking many of the main narrative scenes. They almost look decorative, but our sources consistently emphasize they serve a deeper purpose, right? Something beyond just ornament. How many are there? Where are they? And what is their role?
You're absolutely right. They're far more than decoration. They're exactly 20 ignudi strategically placed throughout the ceiling. They're seated at the four corners of each of the 9 central narrative panels, often holding ribbons or bronze medallions depicting scenes from the books of Kings.
Okay, 20 of them.
And yes, they might appear purely decorative at first glance, given their idealized beauty and seemingly sort of unengaged poses, but they are far more than ornamental. These ignudi, which just means nudes in Italian, are a profound testament to Michelangelo's background as a sculptor. His unparalleled knowledge of human anatomy. They are in many ways his sculptural signature, infused right into the fabric of his painting, asserting the beauty and dignity of the human form.
So they're not just there to look pretty, they're part of the philosophical and aesthetic statement, a celebration of the human body as divine creation.
Precisely. These ignudi represent the idealized human body, a perfect fusion of classical antiquity's aesthetic ideals and the Renaissance's fervent admiration for humanity, especially the male form. They embody the belief that the human form, created in God's image, is inherently beautiful, perfect, a reflection of divine splendor. Their dynamic poses, meticulously rendered musculature, their graceful movements, they underscore the human body as a sacred and universally aesthetic object, visually representing the beauty and perfection of the body created by God. Their unclad state emphasizes their purity, their timelessness, suggesting perhaps a state of human perfectibility, or maybe even angelic beings, unburdened by earthly concerns.
So this raises an important question then. How did Michelangelo use the sheer physical beauty of the ignudi to express the divine and sacred? What was he trying to communicate with these figures that are so physically imposing, yet seem so detached from the main stories?
That's really the core of their enigmatic quality, isn't it? Michelangelo elevated the human body beyond mere flesh. He transformed it into a vessel for spiritual and aesthetic contemplation. He asserted that the physical perfection of man is a direct reflection of divine creation and order. The ignudi are often seen as these pure expressions of human potential and beauty, unbound by specific narrative constraints. They gaze, they hold things, they twist in these graceful athletic motions, embodying a kind of pure, unadorned beauty that speaks to the divine essence of humanity itself.
So they're like intermediaries.
In a way, they don't participate in the biblical narratives directly, but they observe them. They act almost as intermediaries between us, the viewers, and the divine stories unfolding. Perhaps representing angels, perhaps simply representing the sheer beauty of creation in its purest form. They transcend specific biblical narratives to become these universal symbols of human nobility and divine craftsmanship, reminding us of the inherent sacredness and aesthetic value of human creation and ultimate humanist ideal. They're a powerful visual argument that to truly appreciate God's creation, you must also appreciate the beauty and potential of the human form. Tag 5, enduring legacy and timeless insights. Tag 5.1, Michelangelo's artistic philosophy and profound depth.
We've talked a lot about the technical mastery, the grand narratives, the symbolic figures, but let's shift focus now maybe to Michelangelo's deeper intellectual and philosophical contributions. Because the Sistine Chapel ceiling isn't just a descriptive fresco. It feels like it's saying something really profound about the human condition, about our place in the cosmos.
It absolutely is. The Sistine ceiling is not merely descriptive, it's a profound expression of Renaissance human inquiry into themes that are timeless, universal, free will, divine creation, sin, salvation. Michelangelo was an intellectual giant, remember, deeply steeped in Neoplatonic philosophy, which sought to reconcile classical thought with Christian theology.
Right.
His personal struggles, his profound contemplation on God and humanity, his philosophical insights, which we touched on earlier, they're infused into every single brushstroke. The figures' expressions, their body language, they don't just depict biblical story, they reveal the complexity of the human soul. Its dilemmas in relation to God. You see doubt, struggle, hope, despair, wisdom, ecstasy etched into their very forms. It makes them incredibly human, incredibly relatable.
So he's not just painting, he's almost having a philosophical debate right there on the ceiling, grappling with these massive existential questions.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, Michelangelo was absolutely pushing the boundaries, not just of artistic representation, but of intellectual and spiritual inquiry. He was addressing existential questions that remain profoundly relevant today. What does it mean to be human? What is our purpose? What is our relationship to our Creator? What are the consequences of our choices? And what's the path to redemption?
Wow.
His deep anatomical knowledge, combined with his philosophical insights into the nature of humanity and divinity, invites you, the viewer, to engage in profound thought, in self-reflection. It's a call to contemplation, a challenge to look inward as much as upward. It's an immersive experience designed to provoke not just awe at its beauty, but deep introspection and a questioning of one's own place in the grand cosmic narrative.
Yeah.
His work truly epitomizes that Renaissance ideal of a unified pursuit of beauty, knowledge, and truth, where art serves as a vehicle for profound philosophical and theological exploration. He really blurred the lines between artist theologian, and philosopher.
He transformed the ceiling into a visual meditation on humanity's entire journey.
Precisely. It's a work that speaks directly to the soul, inviting a dialogue between the viewer and the profound questions it poses. Hashtag 5.2. Its place in art history and modern relevance.
Okay, let's bring this deep dive towards a close by talking about the monumental impact the Sistine Chapel ceiling had on art history. Because this isn't just one great painting, it genuinely changed everything that came after it, didn't it?
It absolutely did.
Mm.
The Sistine Chapel ceiling cemented the Renaissance's human-centered philosophy at its very apex. It's often seen as the culmination of the High Renaissance, demonstrating what the human mind and hand could achieve when inspired by this divine and intellectual fervor. The work established Michelangelo not only as the greatest sculptor of his age, but also definitively as one of the greatest painters in history, achieving a mastery of fresco that arguably surpassed everyone who came before and many who came after. Before the ceiling, the art world knew his Pietà and David. After it, they knew him as the divine painter of Genesis.
Right.
Its influence was widespread and profound. It impacted subsequent generations of artists in ways that are still being discovered and debated today. It inspired movements from the dramatic intensity and emotionality of the Baroque period. Think painters like Caravaggio taking cues from his dramatic chiaroscuro and intense psychological realism.
Yeah, you can see the lineage.
The sculptors like Bernini, who imbued their marble with Michelangelo's sense of dynamic movement, his figures became the anatomical benchmark for centuries.
So it didn't just expand what art could look like, it expanded what art could do, what it could convey.
Exactly. It significantly broadened the technical and the semantic limits of art. Michelangelo showed that art could not only depict narratives, but also convey profound psychological states, complex philosophical ideas, dramatic human emotion through the figure itself, making the human body the primary vehicle for conveying the most complex and nuanced ideas and feelings. It shifted the focus to dramatic and psychological representations of the human figure, setting a new standard for monumentality and expressive power in painting. And we have to briefly mention again how crucial that comprehensive restoration work from the 1980s onwards was.
Right, the cleaning.
It wasn't just a cleaning, it was this meticulous, decade-long project that not only unveiled Michelangelo's original vibrant color palette and intricate details which have been hidden for centuries by grime and clumsy restorations, but it also offered art historians entirely new avenues for analysis and appreciation, revealing layers of genius previously unknown. It allowed us to truly see the Sistine Chapel as Michelangelo originally intended it, fundamentally impacting our understanding of his artistic philosophy and demonstrating a mastery that was just truly comprehensive.
So this really is a living masterpiece, still revealing its secrets, continuously shaping our understanding of art itself.
What's fascinating here is how these frescoes, through their sheer technical brilliance, their profound narrative, and their universal themes, remain unique in art history. They continue to convey universal messages across generations. It's not just some relic of the past, frozen in time. The Sistine Chapel ceiling remains this revered cultural heritage, inviting awe, introspection, deep contemplation from viewers worldwide, centuries after its creation. Its themes, creation, fall, redemption, choice, the very essence of humanity, they resonate with anyone, regardless of background, making it an enduring and timeless masterpiece, a testament to human potential and artistic vision. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. We've truly had a deep dive into Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling today, haven't we? Really moving beyond just seeing those iconic images to understanding the turbulent historical tapestry that birthed it, the sheer physical and artistic struggle Michelangelo endured, and the profound, multifaceted layers of meaning woven into every single brushstroke. It's so much more than just a painting. It really is a universe of ideas.
It's a unique achievement in art history, definitely. A breathtaking visual symphony that questions humanity's place in the cosmos, its relationship with the divine, and, well, the very meaning of existence themes that are just as relevant today as they were back in the 16th century. It stands as this enduring testament to human creativity and spiritual inquiry, truly a masterpiece that transcends time.
So the next time you see an image of the Sistine Chapel ceiling, or maybe if you're incredibly lucky enough to see it in person one day, what new question will you bring to it? Now that you've sort of seen the layers of complexity and meaning that Michelangelo poured into this timeless masterpiece, what new aha moment, maybe, will you discover within its depths?